So today marks the 11th anniversary of the Sandy Hook mass shooting that took place in 2012. Can you walk me back to that painful day? Where were you and what were you doing when you found out, and what emotions were going through your head?
Yeah, no, it's painful to remember, and it still feels fresh just because the tragedy was so horrendous. I remember exactly what I was doing. I was in a restaurant having a sandwich, and the restaurant happened to have a television monitor tuned into one of the cable news stations, and it was up, and it was clear, even with the early reports, that the tragedy had been huge. It was some time before we knew the scope of it, but obviously it caught my attention because while Sandy Hook Elementary School isn't precisely in my congressional district, it's about 2 miles north of the line, and we're a small community, so everyone knows everybody in Fairfield County. And then, of course, the rest of the day was just story after story. As you might imagine, parents, it's a small town, Newtown, Connecticut, and parents descended onto the school, and you can only imagine the pain of those parents whose children were not initially known to be safe. And the governor, then Governor Dan Malloy, was there, and the parents were hysterical, and so it was just probably one of the worst days of my life in terms of understanding the tragedy that was occurring there. And then, of course, as fact after fact came out, Adam Lanza, this obviously deeply, deeply disturbed individual who had killed his mother, and then gone on the rampage at this school. Just the whole day was filled with increasingly appalling facts. And then, candidly, for years afterwards, until we actually finally just recently made some progress at the federal level, I had to meet with these parents, people like Mark Barden, whose son was killed. I had to meet with them year after year, just saying, nothing's moving in the U.S. Congress, and that was in many ways as bad as the initial day.
So, how is the community doing 11 years later? I know we often see the parents of the victims coming together and showing support. So, how do you feel like the community has been stronger in the past 11 years? Or do you feel like there is still some disappointment that there hasn't been much action on the federal level?
I think it's probably hard for somebody like me who's never been through the murder of a child to characterize how people get through that. I know that that's something, and I just know this from talking to the parents of Sandy Hook. It's not something that you ever recover from. My observation would be, and this is one of the things that I just stand in awe with respect to the parents. My observation would be that an awful lot of parents took this tragedy, this rage, this horror that is unimaginable to most of us, and used it as energy to become advocates. And very quickly a number of nonprofits were set up, both to care for the families of the victims, but also to try to make some progress against the obvious and glaring and unique problems that the United States has with gun violence. So just as we saw at Parkland and elsewhere, an awful lot of people have taken what I can only imagine is all-consuming rage and turned it into advocacy. And that was hard. It was really hard in the sense that, Connecticut, of course, where this took place, very quickly made some real progress that has tamped down gun violence in Connecticut around universal background checks and that sort of thing. But for years, the federal government response to the almost daily shootings was, oh, yet another moment of silence in the House of Representatives. And after a couple of years of that, I got so enraged that I decided, damn it, I'm not doing any more moments of silence, because this body, Article 1 authority, arguably the most powerful body in the country, the Congress, was choosing to do absolutely nothing about, again, the unique American gun violence, even though many of the measures that we're trying to pass here enjoy vast majority support, things like background checks. So, to really answer your question, somehow the parents of Sandy Hook turned unimaginable tragedy into advocacy and a commitment to try to make sure that others don't go through what they went through.
I did want to ask you about something you just touched on, the fact that you've mentioned taking your pain into advocacy, but you refuse to do so by taking a moment of silence. So, can you talk to me more about the motivation behind this? Because after all these tragedies, we often see lawmakers from across the country or that particular area take moments of silence. But what is your rationale for being like, I'm not partaking in that?
Yeah, I mean, it caused a little bit of a stir at the time, and some people even accused me of being disrespectful. But I'd never felt so much conviction before in my life. Maybe because there's a lot of tragedy in the world, but that one really struck literally close to home. And to hear my colleagues say in the Congress of the United States, in a purported democracy where the majority gets its way, that their response to these daily or weekly killings is going to be this solemn moment on the floor where we bow our heads and are quiet for 20 seconds, something that I suppose makes us feel like we're doing something. Baloney, we're not doing a damn thing. And so it just increasingly, as some people say, thoughts and prayers are nice, but what we really need here is action. Your thoughts and prayers really don't stop the next attack. Thank you very much. So as you can tell, it still brings some rage in me. And again, some of this stuff is hard, right? Defining an assault weapon, that's not a simple thing, but some of this stuff is easy, right? And first of all, the easy thing is to acknowledge that the United States has a unique problem, right? The United Kingdom, Germany, Japan, Korea, no other industrialized country has this problem. And the idea that it's somehow video games or people not going to church, it's just insane. People are dying, tens of thousands of people are dying because we are a society awash in guns. And so that's annoying, that's aggravating. And then again, what's really galling is we supposedly live in a democracy, so you'd like to believe that something like universal background checks, the idea that we ought to check you out to make sure you're not a violent criminal before you can acquire a weapon, that enjoys 90% plus support, and yet it can't pass the legislature of the United States. That, you combine all that stuff and it's not hard to get enraged.